Welcome to Everything's Not Black and White with your hosts, Lala and Brian.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Really excited to have y'all with us today. You know, we've been talking a lot, just in general in society, about trying to understand people's life and lived experiences. And sometimes you can't do that unless you really have deep conversations with somebody that you ask them their perspectives and interests and you really listen. You know, there's times in our lives when we're younger that we don't always understand the impact somebody can have on your life just merely by being able to understand where they've been and where they've come from, but also where they're going. So today we're going to be talking about the impact that people can have on your lives that is lasting, that you don't even understand at the time when it happens, but it tends to really change the complete trajectory of your life. So today's guest is my husband, Brian Baker. And we're going to be just talking about somebody who made a pretty significant impact in Brian's life years ago that actually has helped him open his eyes to what he's experiencing now. So, hey, Brian.
Hey, Lala. Wow, thank you for the introduction, and I think I'm a guest every time we do a show.
I know, but I want you to feel special today,
okay.
baby.
Well, thank you.
Well, every day, because that's the kind of wife that I am.
Well, you definitely are doing a great job at that.
Thank you. So why don't you kind of preface the audience a little bit about the relationship that you're going to be talking about today?
Back in the early 90s, I was a young 20-some-year-old kid who thought I knew it all, and I had recently got, I used to do pizza deliveries for a living when I was in my late teens, and I never really worked in any kind of like established professional business type setting, and I ended up getting a job at a furniture store. It was my first real job. The furniture store was Heiligmeier. I think it was a Southern store back in the day.
Yeah, we had one in my town.
Yeah, so and it migrated up here, and I ended up working there, and I ended up meeting a young man, I think he's a couple years older than me. His name was Joddi Jordan.
Oh, Joddi.
Yes, and we worked at Heiligmeier maybe together for about 6 months. We were never on a truck together or anything, but we had a friendship. And during that time, I don't remember how the process exactly went, but we both ended up leaving Heiligmeier, and we landed at Sofa Express, which is another furniture store.
Mm-hmm.
And this was exciting because at the time, Sofa Express only delivered like living room furniture, where Heiligmeier, you had bedroom furniture and like you had all the heavy stuff that you had to take upstairs. Where it's Sofa Express is like, no, you go through the front door and there's the living room and set it down. Super
easy.
Yeah, so it was an upgrade, as Beyonce would say. And so we jumped at that chance, and we landed at Sofa Express, and we both did different jobs. Initially, he was, if I recall correctly, a helper on the truck, and I was a driver. And then at some point, our paths crossed, where he became my helper, and I was the driver, and built a relationship that way. Now, that's how he and I became friends way back then. Now, this is 30 years ago. I haven't talked to Joddi in nearly 30 years. But that was the initial onset of our relationship.
Yeah. So what was it about Joddi that was different for you as far as building relationships or the impact that he would have on you?
The thing about Joddi, and I think this goes with a lot of relationships, you're gonna grow personally if you have relationships with people that are outside your normal grouping. Joddi is African-American male. And at that time, I really didn't have a lot of experience or conversations with young black men at that time. You know, everybody's still very segregated into groups without technically having segregation. What it did is it forced me to have conversations with Joddi. And when you're in a truck for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, you can't just talk all that time. You have to listen. And you don't learn anything when you're talking, as they always say. And I did a lot of listening. And Joddi and I had a lot of tough conversations, good conversations, heartfelt conversations. And it was impactful for me to grow. I really looked at my role with Joddi as I was kind of like the younger brother. He was the older brother after a while. And I was more that kind of annoying brother. Like I always wanted confirmation from Joddi that, I'm doing stuff right. I mean, that's the kind of influence he eventually had on me. And I'm sure he'll probably tell you the same, that I was kind of a pestering little person. Like, we used to play basketball all the time, and I used to call him after the game. Hey, man, how'd this go? What'd you think about this pass? I'm sure he was like, please. It's a basketball game. Move on with your life.
Exactly.
But that was our initial onset of our relationship.
Yeah. So how long in total did you both work together?
Yeah, Joddi and I worked at Sofa Express, where all the growth took place, if I recall correctly, about 2 years before he ended up leaving.
Yeah. So outside of just your partnership and you're having these conversations and you're working together on the truck, like, what other kind of things did you experience together in those 2 years?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, because being at Sofa Express, it was the first time I've been in a setting where I had, at a pizza shop, you had 4 or 5 employees, you got your delivery drivers and the people making the pizza. But at Sofa Express, you had office personnel, you had delivery drivers, supervisors, managers. Like, there was tiers of people that you had to work with. And it was pretty eye-opening to me at Sofa Express early on, with some of the comments and the way people handle things that I would hear. And as I think everybody can say, when you're around your own demographic of people loosen up and they tend to say things that they wouldn't necessarily say in front of another demographic. And I started noticing a lot of that, and it was kind of eye-opening to me, because I grew up in a home where, honestly, black and white was never discussed. The N-word was never used. There was no conversation about racism or anything like that. But there was no conversation about racism. You see what I'm saying? Like, there was no, I didn't understand it.
Right.
It wasn't even a topic. So when I got to Sofa Express, it was kind of eye-opening, the stuff that I witnessed.
So what are some of the things that you're speaking about that you witnessed in the course of those 2 years that you worked with Joddi?
What I witnessed is one thing, and what Joddi witnessed was another thing. And collaboratively over the years, I've put the two together. And that's why I'm doing a podcast today, 30 years later, about it, because it was instrumental in my understanding of race relationships in this country. I distinctly remember one of the very first comments I heard was from a gentleman, and I use that term loosely, named Andrew, who looked at Joddi while we were loading our truck and took a arm cover off a sofa as he was prepping it and put it on his head. And he turned to Joddi and he said, "Hey, Joddi, look, I'm a white Aunt Jemima." And
that's awful.
At the time, I didn't even understand what that meant. I knew it was racist or derogatory in some way, but I didn't even understand what that meant. So you could probably do a better job of explaining the history behind the Aunt Jemima.
It came a lot from the Jim Crow South and the era of what they would call mammies, where it was black domestics who would raise, even breastfeed and nurse white children, and that's how it happened throughout all of slavery and plantation, even Jim Crow, antebellum, Reconstruction, all that period. My grandmother was a domestic and would have been called a mammy. So it's really very personal to me, honestly, and it's a stereotype that people use quite often. And you've seen it in movies. Gone with the Wind is a perfect example. There's actually been in cartoons, even including Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny cartoons. So it is a trope that should not be used any longer, and it is very derogatory. So
yeah, and at the time I had no idea all that information. I've had to learn that over the years since me and Joddi have gone our separate ways, and then it kind of opened my eyes, like, wow, that was really inappropriate. One of the other experiences I had was me and Joddi were out making deliveries, and we were the go-to guys. Like, if a crew couldn't get furniture in, they would call me and Joddi. Like, we were the top dogs. So we had a route going to Southeast Ohio, really rural, as you say nowadays, Trump country. I remember, and this is the first time I've ever seen the effect of what a Confederate flag can do to somebody. And I remember we pulled down this long dirt road, and down the end of this dirt road was the house we had to deliver to, but we had no clarity on which house was which number. There was 2 houses at the end of this road. And one clearly had a Confederate flag flying on it, and one was just a regular house with someplace that looked friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Joddi looking at those two houses, and I looked over at him, and I could see him kind of analyzing the situation. It's almost like, hindsight now, I can look back. He's like, well, I'm either going to go into this racist guy's house or I'm going to go into possibly a non-racist person's house.
Yeah.
And I remember him mentioning something to me like, I hope we're not going to the one with the Confederate flag. And then it kind of dawned on me the impact of what that flag represented to him. As well as many black people, many people in the African American community.
Right.
The Dixiecrats had made that flag.
Yeah.
Very racist back in the day, on top of the history of the Civil War before that.
Yeah.
To see the uncomfortableness he had as we're driving down this road is something I've never had to feel.
Yeah.
And it was kind of eye-opening for me that he's been dealing with this all of his life. And here I am in this one moment, this maybe 45-second drive up a driveway, and it's the first time I've realized that that's an issue.
Yeah.
So I was kind of taken back watching him kind of work through and deal with the emotional process of what he was about to get into.
So did you ever talk to him about it?
We didn't technically talk about it necessarily. There was just an awareness of it all of a sudden for me. I did what I think a lot of white people do when something is uncomfortable for a black person. We kind of sit on the sideline and we stay quiet because it doesn't affect us. But in reality, it does affect us, because here I am 30 years later. I still think of that moment and the uneasiness he had as we drove down that road.
Yeah.
And at that time, I probably should have said, hey, it's cool, man. I got your back. If anything goes down, it's going to be cool. At the end of the day, though, we went down that road and it turned out to be the other house that didn't have the Confederate flag. So it was kind of a wash. But it didn't delete the feeling that he had.
Right.
And that was kind of eye-opening for me. Still think about it.
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that you recognize that now, that you probably should have spoken up at the time. I've had a situation in a previous work environment where I was basically bullied and harassed by my leadership, and I truly believe a lot of it had to do with my race. And I remember going to a former coworker at the time, and I said, I need you to stand up with me and for me on this. And it was a white person, and they told me that they were fearful for their job and they couldn't help me.
Yeah, and
that was a hurtful feeling, to be honest. It was very hurtful.
It makes me sad that we feel like we can't have a voice because if we stick up for a person we feel like's being discriminated against, it puts our job in jeopardy. But then you got to step back and be like, well, how does that person feel? They deal with that all the time.
Yeah.
What is it? How inconvenient is it for me for a moment to stand up for someone who has to deal with it every day? It's not.
Right.
It's really not.
Right. Right.
And being that's not the only racism I've seen affect him. And we're talking about making a stand. I started at that point kind of understanding some of the challenges and issues that he's had to deal with over the time. And we actually delivered to a house in Pickerington. We were delivering furniture in the house here in Pickerington, Ohio. And it's a suburb of Columbus. And we took the furniture in. It was a nice middle to upper class resident. And we took all the furniture in, set it up, cleaned up after ourselves. We did everything a professional delivery person would do. And Joddi went back out to the truck to put the straps up and stuff. And at the time, I was getting the customer to sign the paperwork and just saying they got it delivered and everything was okay. And I remember the lady turned to me and she said, would you like some cookies? Just for us taking in the furniture. She was genuinely being nice. And no sooner did she finish her sentence, her husband, which I assume is her husband behind her, turned around and said, well, his partner probably wants a banana. And it was at this time, like my silence, like, what do I do? Like, I feel at this point, I recognize my silence as a problem. But at the same time, how do I handle this?
Especially with a customer,
a customer, because you got to keep your professionalism. Like you said, people don't want to put their job in jeopardy sometimes. So at the time, I was unsure how to handle that. But I knew it would be really upsetting to Joddi if he knew that that was said.
Mm-hmm.
So in the few minutes that I had to analyze the situation, I thought in my mind it would have been best to just get Joddi away from the house and then address the situation with him from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I told him what the guy said, the hurt he had, because he did everything he's supposed to. And if you don't, one thing about Joddi's from, he was born in Mississippi. So he has a yes ma'am, yes sir mentality. When he talks to people, he talks very respectful. And he did that same respectful behavior to these folks. And that husband still found enough hate in his heart to make a racist comment about a banana as I was walking out the door.
That's awful.
And I was so shocked that he said that. I didn't even say nothing to him. I literally had the cookies in my hand and I just turned around and walked out. And that guy's wife gave him the look. And all of us men who are married, we know we've said some stupid stuff and the wife gives us a look. We've done something really stupid.
Yeah.
So I hope his wife addressed that situation with him and said never again.
Yeah.
Because it was completely inappropriate.
Yeah. That's really hard, in the face of blatant racism to ignore it and to not deal with it. Not all racism is so overt, right? Mm-hmm. There's some that covertly happened. Were there other situations that you experienced with Joddi? And I'll ask, if there were, did you feel empowered to speak up at any time?
Yes, there were more situations. The situations I just told you about were stuff that happened outside the workplace. Inside the workplace is really where I got challenged, because here are my coworkers that I got to look at every day. And I remember one day, I don't know if we were running behind or what, but my manager, I believe his name was Al back then, and he's probably passed on by now. It's been 30 years, but he said to me and a few other white guys that were standing around him, because stuff was behind, he's like, I can't get these monkeys to get their job done. And I remember thinking to myself, like, now I'd be like, listen, dude, you're an idiot. But back then I was young. I didn't know no better. So I just kind of absorbed it, like we said before, a lot of white people do this. They absorb that information. Now this was the I think basically the operations manager. So he was the big dog on the floor. But at the same time, we had another guy named Mike that was just under him, who was a supervisor. And one day I needed a ride home, and warehouse that we worked at was in Southeast Columbus, which is like the zip code we live in now is like 55% African American. And it's the same zip code I lived in back then. And when Mike was giving me a ride home, I just told him I live around the corner. He might give me a ride home. He's like, sure, no problem. And as we're driving home, I said, hey, Mike, where you live? I'm not taking you out of your way or anything. I was like, you live around here? He's like, no, I don't live around here. There's too many N-words around here. And I was like, what? Like, what world do we live in?
Yeah.
I was taken back again by comments from leadership, white leadership, about what's going on in these communities or with African American people. And these two people know that my partner is Joddi, and they did not give a shit.
Wow.
They said it regardless. So this is where the big challenge came in. Joddi and I rode the same truck every day. We did essentially the same job. We were a team, and we were the go-to team, like I said earlier. So if anybody needed anything, we were the ones to go fix it if some other drivers couldn't get the job done. So our reviews came around, and it was time for us to get a raise. And guess who got a raise? It was higher than the other person. It was me. And this bothered me. And why this bothered me so much was because that operations manager, Al, and that supervisor, Mike, are the ones who did our reviews. And those are the people that ultimately gave us our raises. So here I know in the back of my head, one guy's referring to black people as monkeys, one guy's calling them the N-word, and here I am, and I'm getting more of a raise than Jodi's getting, and we do the exact same job on the exact same truck, and we get the job done. We're good at our job. No doubt about it. We're probably the best that was there, the best two-man team. And so I had a dilemma. I've now grown. I've recognized, okay, this is racism. This is bullshit. He should have got the same I got. We're a team.
Yeah.
And they should not separate, equal.
Yeah.
Equality. We talk about it.
Right.
And for me to get a bigger raise than him, his was marginal. I think it was like 15 cents, 20 cents or something. Like, it was marginal compared to, like, mine was 45, 50 cents or something back then.
Yeah.
Which don't sound like much, but when you're 20 years old.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Sure.
So here's my challenge. What do I do now? Do I keep being the silent white person that I've always been and not challenge or push back on that subject?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I finally take a stand? Like, hey, Joddi's my buddy. He's had my back. I'm going to have his back. I decided to make a stand. Let me tell you how that went.
How did it go?
So I go in and talk to Dan Quinn. The Silver Express was founded by the Quinn family in 1959 by Townie Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
So his sons run that operation, or did run the operation. It has since gone defunct. They sold to Klausner in 2002, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But his sons actually ran the warehouse and the inside offices and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So the one son, Dan Quinn, I've raised such a stink about it, I finally got called into a meeting. And it's me, and here's basically the owners staring me down. They wanted to know what I had to say. So I told them how unfair I thought this was. And I told them about the previous supervisor using the N-word and the previous manager talking about the monkeys working in the warehouse. And I'll never forget him. You know when you're talking to somebody, you can tell they're not really listening to you?
Yeah.
That's what he was doing. He's kind of giving me that, like, It's just kind of like I'm waiting to get to what I want to say.
Yeah.
And after I was done saying all this, trying to stick up for Joddi, instead of Dan saying, hey, I get it. We got some issues. We're going to work on them. I apologize if this is how this came across. We're going to try to make, that would have been the proper thing to say.
Yeah.
Dan looked at me and he's like, if you're not happy with your job, why are you here? And here, I had just had a baby prior to this.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am now, basically feeling like my job's being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said basically told me to shut up. And if I recall correctly, at the end of the day, he did get a raise, equal raise. I haven't talked to him about that since, because shortly after that he quit.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that my battle was for the good.
Mm-hmm.
But it just kind of goes to show, even for white people to stick up for underrepresented groups here in the U.S., there's still pushback from other white people. They want you to be quiet, stay in your lane, and that's challenging, because I only had to deal with that for a mere moment.
Yeah.
He has to deal with that, and other people have to deal with that every single day.
Yeah.
And it was disheartening to actually feel like you're trying to say something, do something right, and to only feel like your job was being threatened, and they were using your job and your status of having a new family against you because they want to shut you up.
It's tragic and it's awful, and the sad part is in 2021 we still see it very much reflected in the workplace. So I guess my biggest question to you would be, how do we change this? Like, how does this change? How do we get better and move beyond this?
Well, I think it takes white people to quit being silent and speak up. And I think it takes other white people to quit talking and listening.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges we face as white individuals in this country are not near the challenges that other minority groups in this country face, period. We are the default factor. White males are the default factor, especially white males my age and up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing we can do is start listening. That's probably the best thing.
Well, I think that's a great thing. You can't understand somebody's lived experience until you have these conversations with them. So I think it's really super important. So fast forward 30 years, here we are. How are you different because of your relationship with Joddi?
Yeah, a quote comes to my mind, and I thought of this quote. I was doing some research, and because Joddi loves boxing, if I recall correctly, and he used to box down in Mississippi from what I recall. But there's a quote that Muhammad Ali said, that a man who views the world the same at 50 as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life. And that totally represents how I feel. Like, even though I was learning those lessons 30 years ago, I didn't understand them fully until now. And now that I've understand over the years these lessons, I've handled myself differently. So much so that I've actually married you, who is a black woman.
Yes.
I have helped raise a black daughter, and I have become an advocate for the black community and all underrepresented communities, for that matter.
Yeah.
That is some of the greatest lessons I've learned and grown from through my short window of a relationship with Joddi. I've learned how to be better educated. I learned how to be more compassionate. I learned how to be more understanding. And it's been amazing because it's eye-opening and it frees you from the restriction of being ignorant.
Yeah, I love it. And I know I can definitely say, we've been together for 13 years and I've seen so much growth in you in that time, just how you are so compassionate and you literally fight on the front lines with folks and you open your mind to learning different experiences, from culture to food to education to work experiences to everything, religion even. Like, you really talk to people and try to understand them. So it is commendable, and I appreciate you and the efforts that you put in. So I would say, what is your challenge or call to action for people who are listening in the community, whether they represent the majority of dominance, white dominance, or they are part of historically underrepresented groups who want an opportunity to be seen, heard, and valued? What is your advice?
I think the best thing we can do as a country, and I said this earlier, is simply listen, empathize, understand. Because your experience, my experience, they're not the same. You, LaShondra, and Joddi have been the two most influential people in my life of African American descent to help me become the person I am today. While Joddi has no idea he did that. Hopefully he'll hear this podcast at some point, but it's instrumental to make friends that don't look like you. It's instrumental to have conversations, deep conversations, and don't be offended if you're not on the same page. Listen and try to understand, try to empathize, try to be compassionate.
I love it. And that's what it's about. I mean, we're in this journey called life together, and none of us are going to get out unscathed. So let's see how we can help each other, lift each other's burdens, and work better together. Love it.
Absolutely. And Joddi, if you hear this podcast, brother, I still got your back, man. It's 30 years later. I ain't seen you. I don't even know where you're at, but I do appreciate you. I do respect you. And I'm sorry I couldn't be the ally that I needed to be in my early 20s. But rest assured, I damn sure will be your ally today.
That's awesome. Thanks, Brian. And thank you all for listening. We appreciate you. To give us feedback on this podcast, you can like us on Facebook on Everything's Not Black and White on our page, or you can send us an email at enbwpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It was a great show, and I'm thank you for listening to the entire podcast up to this point. And we so appreciate you as we grow. We hope you grow with us, and we cannot thank you enough.
Thank you so much. It's been a year, y'all. We've been doing this for a year, and we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much. Like, share, and subscribe. We'll see y'all next time. See you.